Peace. Welcome back to the Voices of Reason show. I'm your host, Skilo Slim, and today we have a very special person in the building, actually a return guest, and I'm honored to have her back, Mrs. Deborah Neary. How are you?
Well, thank you, and
Welcome.
I'm honored to be a return guest.
Yeah, you're our first return.
Am I really?
Yeah,
oh my
really.
gosh, I'm so grateful and honored. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming. So I wanted to know that, okay, you're running for a public office.
I am.
Why don't you fill us in a little bit and let everyone know exactly what's going on?
Sure. I'm running for the State Board of Education in District 8, which is everything west of 60th Street in Omaha, half of Douglas County, all the way to Elkhorn and Bennington and Ralston and Westside and OPS. And the State Board of Education makes all the education policy for the state of Nebraska in regards to like setting standards for each of the study areas like science and math and social studies, and they make the decisions for all public schools, private schools, vocational schools, and home schools.
Okay.
And we're one of a few states that actually has an elected State Board of Education. Some states either don't have one or it's politically appointed.
Yeah, that's what I thought, it was appointed.
But in Nebraska, I mean, for me, it's all about accountability back to the taxpayer. And so I love that our State Board of Education is elected. And so we're like between the school district boards. I mean, they're going to be our partners in working on things, but there's a hierarchy there in terms of education policy decision making.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So what motivated you to want to be in this position? Like, is it something particular that you saw happening?
Oh, yeah. I don't want to start talking negative already, but
no, you don't have to.
Well, I'll just say the positive things. I've been, right now, I'll get into but my whole life, I don't have my own kids, but I've had 8 foster kids. And because of those experiences, I've learned so much that I didn't know about education systems, foster care systems, systems of racism, systems, just social structures that we have that are not productive. And so and I also have a special needs sister. I've been on the board of Madonna School for many years. They support youth with intellectual disabilities and autism, and just exposed to, and I look at our education gaps, our achievement gaps, and I've always wanted to, and I always have. For 25 years, I've worked in nonprofits that support educational structures. At the Durham Museum, we supported curriculum goals for all the school districts. In my current nonprofit now, we support mentoring activities for all youth. And so I've always worked to support education because I just think, if everyone is successful in our state, then our state's going to be successful.
Yeah,
that we all need to be successful in order for us to have a place that people want to live and grow.
Right, I definitely agree with that. So what would be the first thing that you would do?
So the first thing coming up is the social studies standards.
Okay.
And so we'll be setting the standards of what's going to be taught for the next 7 years. And my opponent, that's part of the reason I'm running, he's written all sorts of racist blogs and was asked by our governor and everybody, voted by the State Board of Education to step down. Because of that, he also was arrested for sexually harassing, while he was drunk, a 17-year-old girl at a Red Robin. There's so many reasons that I wouldn't want him representing education issues for my kids.
Right.
And because I don't think he can look at everything and be fair if he's writing these racist blogs and calling President Obama a half-breed and, some of the things that he's done. And so that motivated me. And I guess, that's also what got me running. But when you look at some of the stuff he's done in the last 4 years, last year they had every scientist in the state of Nebraska advocating for what the science standards should be, and he voted against them. And he didn't want climate change taught in our science classes. And I just think, whether you think climate change is man-made or whether it's just natural, I think almost everyone agrees there's something happening in our environment, and
Definitely.
It was very evident this summer, everywhere we traveled. And so to hold back science standards for political reasons was sad for me. And he also wanted creationism taught. Well, instead of evolution. And I'm all for religious education. I grew up in Catholic schools, but in my school, I learned evolution,
me too. Yeah.
And in my Bible study with my family, I learned creationism. And I think there needs to be a difference there. And so I just, when you ask me what I want to do, social studies standards matter to me a lot. I have a master's in history. I want to know that we're teaching social studies in a way that's inclusive, that it's fact-based, and that it's respectful. I'm not for this exceptionalism that we've done everything perfect. An example is I saw on Facebook last night, a lot of people were talking about the lynching that happened in Omaha in 1919. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, Willie Brown,
Yes, and I did an exhibit at the Durham Museum on that topic quite a while ago. I've learned so much about that topic, and I think that we need to learn about that in our history classes.
I agree.
How can you keep from, we have to learn from history and even our mistakes that we've made in history. And so social studies standards are going to be very controversial, and I'm grateful that I can be a part of that discussion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, because, even if you don't agree with climate change, you have to agree that it's not okay to just keep burning coal. We've been doing it for over 100 years,
It's, but we need kids to think for themselves.
Critically
we can't
thinking.
just keep them in the dark about everything. It's the kind of jobs that are going to be out there when these youth are graduating are going to be very different than the kind of, jobs, well, I'm a lot older than you, but
those were the jobs that were leaving. When I was coming of age, it's at first we could go and find a manufacturing job. You didn't even have to graduate high school. It's and now those jobs are gone.
Right, and youth need to be able to analyze and think for themselves.
Right.
And they need all the information. And that's the other thing. The way we teach youth, we need to look at why there are achievement gaps. Are there biases in the way we're teaching? Right. That's important to me. And, asking those questions, making sure that, we have schools that have an environment that's conducive to learning for all youth.
Right.
I want to see more teachers of color I want to see more administrators of color in our school districts. I love that we have Dr. Logan, who is we're so lucky to have her. But, kids need to, if they're a youth of color, they need to see people like them being successful every day.
I agree.
And so part of that is, making sure that we have young people interested in going into education. But unfortunately right now, this year in Nebraska, our School of Education, the enrollment is down. People don't want to go into education because teachers aren't making enough money, they're having to pay for their own school supplies, and they're being really disrespected by politicians who want to make teachers and the teacher unions the enemy. I know too many teachers that are paying for school supplies out of their pocket every month, and that they're bringing stuff into their lives, taking care of kids.
Yeah, that's how it was growing up. That's what a teacher did.
When you have OPS population, 70% of the youth on free or reduced lunch, our teachers are expected to be social workers too, on top of everything else. They're dealing with things that, we as a society need to be dealing with. There's systemic issues that we all need to be looking at, and we can't just expect our teachers to handle all of that. And I do want to be an advocate for teachers. I want to get, more funding for teachers. And all too often, I think people want to blame the superintendent. And
it's like the easy fix.
It is, and I guess I've been in this world of policymaking for so long that I kind of understand how the dollars flow. And the superintendent is doing the best they can with what they have. But Nebraska is the 49th in terms of funding that our state gives education. We're the 49th out of 50 states, meaning we're the worst funded, state education system.
Who do we beat?
Mississippi and that's a good question. I should know the answer to that, but I know. But it's 49th, and so when our legislature this year is talking about property taxes, which we do need to talk about, but pulling the funding from education isn't the answer because
never.
And that's it. It's like this year, a lot of people are trying to make the teachers' unions the enemy. Well, I mean, these are hardworking people that are, taking care of the youth that are going to be taking care of us when we're older. And they need to be respected and they need to be supported. And, I laugh because my brother's kind of retired at an early age and he became a physics teacher just recently. And this year even though he's in his 50s, he's student teaching. And he's told me that, he wants to make it fun, the physics that he's teaching. And so he's spending $100 a month on school supplies for these experiments.
Wow.
Like
his
out of his own money. And he can do it. So it's not, but I think about teachers starting salary of $30-some thousand.
Right.
Like how are they able to also pay for school supplies on top of that? I mean, that's just a huge issue for me. And
as it should be, because most people who become teachers, they care. So it's why attack? I don't understand when it's a problem. Why attack teachers?
Right.
That doesn't make sense. So what could you do in that role to change those things?
Well, I think educating people is really important, and I want to be a voice, even though the legislature is what makes the decisions about funding, school funding. It's like, I want to use my position on the state board, any little influence that I have, to make sure that I'm talking to state senators and educating voters about what the issues are and what's reality. Not what's a political soundbite that everyone's throwing out, but what is the reality? And, also I want to advocate for getting teacher support for, we have so many youth that have experienced trauma or experienced toxic stress. And there's a trauma-informed teaching environment is going to be so much more successful. And anyone who's watching this, I hope they'll go on Netflix and watch the movie Paper Tigers. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it just shows what a huge difference we can be making if we just learn how to support youth who have experienced trauma. And having just a little bit of knowledge about mental health issues. Mental health issues is not a stigma. It's kind of like somebody who has a physical health element. It's
you would accommodate it.
And so, but the trauma and the toxic stress. So providing training for all the people that work with youth. We do this in the mentoring sector. We provide a trauma-informed mentoring program so that if a mentor is working with a youth and they're seeing behaviors, it isn't just about disciplining, but it's about, understanding that there's some hurt behind that and being a listener and a friend. We want to stay away from trying to save anybody, obviously, because, that's not a productive dynamic for anybody. But listening, because I believe behind all of the negative stuff that's happening is some fear and sadness. And, if our schools can be, I think that's how we can prevent these shooters from coming back. Like if we can help youth when they're young with some of the mental health things that are happening to them before they escalate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I agree. Because, I mean, the school is the place, like, I would hope that would catch these type of things. You know, to notice that a child's being abused or maybe in a situation that they're not supposed to be in.
Right.
And it's like, from what I remember from being in school, it's like the kid who acts out gets pushed somewhere else.
Exactly. Or a kid, so my brother-in-law is a principal, and he told me in his state they had a youth with a gun, and they're not allowed to tell the next school district, you know, because of confidentiality, that youth came to school with a gun and he has some mental health issues. They just they kick him out of their school district.
Right.
But it's kicking the can down the road. That's a huge problem. Like, we need to figure that out. Instead of kicking the can down the road, how are we getting that youth the help that they need? You know, and I'm not blaming administrators for kicking the can down the road, because, you know, they're so overwhelmed with, you know, so many challenges. It is the system, right? But we need to look at that system. You know, there was something that passed the legislature this year that would have provided a level of mental health coordination in all of the ESUs across the state, and it got vetoed by our governor. And even though it had, you know, it had support from both parties, I mean, it passed the legislature, and so I'm sad about that. But it's those kind of things that we need to be fighting for and advocating for and educating people about. Like, you know, the first step is to get these coordinators in the ESUs that can help organize the supports that need to be in place for youth that are identified as having some mental health issues. And then we need to have access to whatever kind of support needs to be there. And using technology, you know, it's like, how, you know, we don't need to have the counselor right there face to face. It's like, I think kids would rather talk to a computer screen anyway. So, you know, how can we have these kind of telephone or, you know, services that are through technology so that we can, it's more cost efficient, we can expand the resources further. There's so many rural areas where, you know, they can't afford to have those kind of supports in place, but they need to be provided. And so how can we stretch our dollars further for our education systems?
Definitely. So do you have any type of plans for, because you spoke on like the achievement gap, and from what I understand, so, okay, let me ask a question first.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think about Omaha a lot, but you would be for the entire state, or is it just the Omaha area?
So Douglas County. Which is
okay.
like 5 school districts that includes Omaha Public Schools.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, but it also includes Elkhorn. And I've talked to every single superintendent, and, you know, these school districts are all really different, and what they need is very different. And, you know, I don't mean to be negative about my opponent, but in 4 years of being on the State Board of Education, he has never sat down with one of the school superintendents. And when I asked him that in our debate, he said, well, I don't want to be talking to the education establishment. Well, I mean,
But they're partners, right?
Well, that's just it. It's like, who knows more about what's going on in the school districts? I mean, I'm not saying we only listen to administrators. We need to listen to teachers and parents and youth and, I mean, everybody. But we can't just not listen to the education establishment. Like, how does that get anything done? And so, but yes, Omaha Public Schools is, you know, where my interests have been. It's where I've worked the most. I mean, I have, you know, there are needs in all the school districts, and I've had great conversations with everybody. And you know, even though we'll be making decisions about all of the school districts across the state, you know, my heart is certainly, you know, and my voters are in Douglas County. And and just on that topic, something that's very important is I'm for local school district control. Like, I don't think we can give one-size-fits-all solutions across the state of Nebraska. You know, because
that's what I was getting at. Like.
Yeah, it is different. And so I really believe that, you know, the Omaha Public School board members and superintendent and teachers know best what they need in their district. They don't need some top-down government agency telling them what they need to do.
Right.
Now, if they're having challenges with that, we want to support them for sure. And there are avenues for allowing that. But I just don't believe in too much government from the education standpoint. Like,
oh, yeah, I understand.
I mean, it's especially in a place like Nebraska where it's so different. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very different. Because
Yeah.
I mean, that brings us to like I said, the achievement gap. Like, do you have a plan or idea of how to help that?
Well, I think that we, one of the first things that has happened at the state board level is the way testing is done. And they have a new test out there called NESCAS. And my understanding is that it's more suited to really drilling down and understanding how different the needs of each individual student.
Right.
And because it's a flexible test, like if you're, in the first part of the test, you're not getting a lot of the answers, then the test is going to change for you. So it isn't like a static test that everyone takes the exact same thing. It's more flexible to the needs of every student. So, some of that is just understanding each individual student and what they need. And I think the testing is going to help us a little bit more, but it's kind of like attendance. In my job, we focus a lot on school attendance. And I think I've been in so many meetings talking about why do we have why are there kids that are chronically absent?
Right.
And honestly, I think it's every student, it's a different reason. I don't think there's one answer, and I don't think there's one solution, and I think we need to drill down on the personal level and understand, and in some cases, mentoring is helping us find out. Like, we found out, we had a school-based mentoring activity that we started this last year, and we found out like 3 of the youth were being bullied at school, and that's why they didn't want to go to school. And so it's like,
that makes sense.
It does. And so, everybody wants to just blame whoever, blame the parents, blame the school. I mean, I think we need to understand and by doing that, we need to be listening to parents. And in order to listen to parents, I think we need to have representatives, a lot more representatives that are people of color. Like, if I go in, I mean, people aren't going to trust me or listen to me. If I go in and try to talk to parents in, certain school areas, it's like, I think it isn't one thing that I want to advocate for, but over time, it's, getting more youth involved, more young people of color becoming teachers, more teachers of color in all of our classrooms, like not just in North Omaha. I love that, my husband went to Creighton Prep, and I was so excited. They just hired a dean of students that's a person of color.
Really?
Yes, and it's a predominantly white school, but
Creighton
it's like, we need to have those interactions. Like and so that's what I'm an advocate for, that, when we talk about equity issues, it's drilling down to the individual level, listening to parents, because I don't have the answers, but I know that that we have some biases. I know that we haven't asked all the right questions, and I don't know that we've been talking to all the right people, honestly.
Right. Because that makes perfect sense. Because I would imagine, like, when I'm hearing what you're saying, I would imagine that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that you would receive a lot of pushback in the community. Because when I talk to people and I see stuff on social media and just decisions that's made, it doesn't seem like a diverse community is what people want.
No.
So, like, is it hard to, like, to make those connections to see how you can serve everyone?
It's, I am finding that when I can have the conversation one person at a time and have an authentic discussion where somebody's heart is open and they're willing to be a little bit, have a little humility. Like, I think I find that we all kind of want the same thing,
Right.
and I think fear is behind a lot of things that happen. And I do get pushback, and people don't understand me, and they want to categorize me. I mean, even people of my own political party want to categorize me. You know,
Right.
I mean, it's like I'm not that box. You know, I don't fit in a box, and I'm all about having conversations where we all win. Like, I just believe that if we lift up everyone, you know, it helps even our brightest and our best and our, you know,
Right, I
most
agree.
privileged to be successful. Like, we all win. It doesn't,
Yeah.
I'm not about putting just resources in you know, in one area. It's like, how can we change our learning environments that helps everyone be more successful? And, you know, and it's a question that across the state of Nebraska, as our populations change, so many rural communities are now, it's, you know, people of color that are the majority voters. And it's like, we need to talk about how we can have everyone be successful, not, you know, and that's going to take hard work.
Right, definitely. Well, could you let everyone know how they can get in touch with you and help with your campaign?
Thank you. Deborah Neary, State Board of Education, and debneary.com, or my Facebook page, Deborah Neary for State Education. And I just can't tell you how grateful I am.
Oh, thank you.
These were great questions, and I love this discussion, and I just can't wait to get there and you know, and keep having these conversations with you about this, because I have so much more to learn once I'm elected, because I don't have the answers and I need to talk to people. So thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you for coming. And that's the main thing that I like about when I was seeing your campaign, was that it's not like, hey, do A, B, and C and everything will be okay.
Right.
It was more like, hey, let's learn together. Because that's how I feel too. Like, let's talk to each other.
Yes.
Figure out like where the problem is. We can put our best foot forward.
Right.
So with that, I would like to say thank you again for coming, and I always appreciate it. And you could come back anytime.
You're so sweet. Thank you.
Really, you can. I mean it. So, once again, people, this was another episode of the Voices of Reason show. Please reach out, get involved, because a lot of these decisions will come down to you, and it affects your family whether you are active or not. So you might as well come out and get involved. Then later you can hold someone accountable, because if you don't get involved, then no one's going to want to hear your opinion later. I'm sorry, that's just frankly how it is. But once again, reach out to us on Facebook at the Voices of Reason show if you want to keep this conversation going. And with that, I'm going to say peace.